The women laughed so hard that their voices echoed through the open courtyard. Some covered their mouths, pretending to be polite, but their eyes sparkled with cruel joy. "Look at her," one of them whispered loudly enough for me to hear. "A married woman for 20 years and not a single child to show for it." Another one joined in. "Maybe God has closed her womb. Or maybe her husband regrets marrying her." I tried to walk past with my head high, but their words were like arrows hitting my chest. Then one of them, a plump woman with a headscarf too bright for her mean face, leaned forward and said, "You should at least give your husband a reason to keep you, before another woman does what you cannot." I stopped. My heart pounded so hard I could hear it. If only they knew the truth. If only they understood the real reason I had no children. But I couldn't tell them, not here, not now. Because if I did, the whole village would never see me the same again. I clenched my fists and forced myself to keep walking. But inside, the memory of that day, the day everything changed, came rushing back. The day I found out why I would never be a mother. And it wasn't because of me. It was because of him. My husband. But before I could even open my mouth to defend myself, another voice from the group shouted, "Maybe your husband is with another woman right now, giving her the child you can't give him." My vision blurred with anger. My lips trembled. If only they knew that what they were saying was dangerously close to the truth. I turned around slowly, and when my eyes met theirs, they all went silent. My voice was shaking, but every word was sharp. "One day," I told them, "you will wish you never mocked me." Then I walked away, straight to the very place where the secret began. The place where I first discovered the truth that broke my heart. But before I could step through the door, I heard a sound inside. A woman's laugh. His voice answering. And then something that made my knees almost give way. I will never forget what I saw when I opened that door. I was only 19 when I first met Richard. He was tall, charming, and had a smile that made my heart beat faster. Back then, I was full of dreams. Dreams of a big family, a house filled with children's laughter, and a husband who would love me until the end of time. Richard promised me all of that. He said he wanted the same things I did. And I believed him, because love makes you blind to what you should see. The first few years of our marriage were sweet. We struggled financially, but we were happy. Or at least, I thought we were. We talk about baby names, about which school our children would attend. Every month, I prayed for the good news, but it never came. After 3 years, people started asking questions. After 5 years, the whispers began. My mother-in-law suggested we see a doctor. Richard said we didn't need to. "It will happen when it happens," he told me. But deep inside, I was worried. I begged him to come with me for a medical checkup. He refused every time. He said he was too busy. But when the insults from the women in the market became too much to bear, I decided to go alone. The doctor examined me and smiled gently. "There's nothing wrong with you," she said. "You're perfectly healthy and able to have children." Her words brought me hope. Then, what could be the problem? I asked. She hesitated. "Your husband should be tested too." I left the clinic that day feeling lighter, thinking the solution was simple. We just needed Richard to get tested. But I didn't know that was the beginning of a fight that would tear our marriage apart. When I told Richard what the doctor said, his face changed. His smile disappeared, and for the first time, I saw anger in his eyes. "So now you think it's my fault?" he shouted. "No, I tried to explain, but he cut me off. "Never bring this up again," he warned. I thought maybe he was just embarrassed. So I stayed quiet for a while. The years passed. The whispers grew louder. The insults became sharper. And Richard became distant. He no longer spoke about children. He no longer touched me the same way. Some nights, he didn't even come home. Then one afternoon, while cleaning his study, I found something. A folded piece of paper hidden between the pages of a book. My hands shook as I opened it. It was a medical report. And right there, in black and white, were the words that explained everything. Infertile. No possibility of natural conception. It was Richard's name on the paper. The date showed he had done the test before we even got married. My head spun. My stomach twisted. All these years he knew. He knew he could never give me children. And instead of telling me, He let me carry the shame. He let the whole world believe I was the problem. I sat there for hours, the paper clutched in my hand. A part of me wanted to confront him immediately. Another part of me wanted to pretend I never saw it. But I couldn't unsee it. That night when he came home, I asked him about it. His face turned pale. Then he snatched the paper from my hand and tore it to pieces. "Stay out of my things," he said coldly. I wanted to scream. I wanted to tell everyone the truth. But I stayed silent because I still loved him. And because I hoped foolishly that maybe one day we could find another way to have children. But Richard had other plans. One evening about 2 months later, I was returning from the market when I passed by his workshop. The door was slightly open. I heard laughter, soft, playful, feminine. And then I heard Richard's voice. I stepped closer, my heart pounding. When I pushed the door open, I froze. What I saw made me drop the basket in my hands. Do you want me to continue chapter 2 starting exactly from what she saw when she opened that door? That's where the next extreme event begins. Richard was sitting on the old leather couch in his workshop. But he wasn't alone. A young woman, no older than 22, was leaning against him, her hand resting on his chest as she laughed. His arm was wrapped around her waist and his face was glowing in a way I hadn't seen in years. For a moment I couldn't breathe. My hands went cold. The sound of my basket hitting the floor made them both turn. The girl's smile vanished instantly, but Richard, he didn't even look ashamed. Instead, he stood up slowly, his eyes narrowing at me like I was the one intruding. "What are you doing here?" he asked, his voice flat. I swallowed hard, my voice shaking. "What is this?" The girl looked between us, clearly uncomfortable, but Richard gave a small laugh, cold and without humor. "This," he said, "is none of your business." "None of my business?" My voice rose. "You're my husband." He shrugged. "A husband who needs a real family. You can't give me that." The words stung like fire on my skin. I wanted to shout, to throw the truth in his face, that he was the reason we had no children. But my heart stopped me. I didn't know why. Maybe because I wasn't ready for the war it would start. The girl stood awkwardly, picking up her bag. "I should go," she whispered. But Richard held her hand. "No," he said firmly. "Stay." That broke something inside me. I turned and walked away, my steps heavy, my chest tight. Behind me I could still hear her laugh, softer now, almost guilty. That night Richard didn't come home. The next morning the rumors began. Some said they had seen him with a new woman in the market. Others said he was already talking about marrying her. My mother-in-law called me, her voice sharp. "If you can't give my son a child, don't be surprised when he finds someone who can." I almost told her then. Almost told her that her precious son had been lying to all of us. But my tongue refused to move. I was still trapped in the cage of love and shame I had built for myself. Days passed, and Richard became a stranger in my own home. He would leave early, return late, and speak to me only when necessary. The bed we once shared felt like a cold, empty desert. One evening, I decided I couldn't take it anymore. I took the torn pieces of his medical report from the trash where he had thrown them weeks earlier. I had carefully kept them in a small envelope. I pieced them together, my hands trembling, until the truth was whole again in front of me. I made up my mind. I would confront him in front of his family. Let them see the truth. Let them know I wasn't the barren woman they thought I was. But before I could put my plan into action, something happened that turned my pain into rage. I was walking back from the well when I saw them, Richard and the young woman, standing in front of our house. But they weren't alone. In her hands, she held a tiny baby, wrapped in a bright blue blanket. And Richard was beaming. The neighbors gathered around, congratulating him as if he had just won a prize. "So beautiful," someone said. "Now you finally have a child to carry your name." My heart sank. My vision blurred. I could barely hear their voices over the sound of my own pulse pounding in my ears. Then Richard looked at me. Not with guilt. Not with shame. But with victory. "This," he said loudly, "is my son." The crowd cheered. And I felt my knees give way. Because I knew that baby was not his. And I knew exactly whose it was. The world seemed to tilt under my feet. The voices of the neighbors faded into a dull hum. Like I was underwater. My eyes were fixed on that tiny baby wrapped in blue. He had a small birthmark just above his left eyebrow, one I knew too well, because I had seen it before on someone else. I blinked hard, my mind racing. That mark was identical to the one my younger brother, Daniel, had since birth. My stomach twisted. My hands went cold. And in that moment, a truth so ugly and unthinkable began to form in my mind. I stepped closer, my legs trembling. The young woman holding the baby looked down, avoiding my gaze. She couldn't meet my eyes. That was all the confirmation I needed. I whispered, "Whose child is this?" Richard smiled, but it wasn't a kind smile. "I told you," he said proudly, "my son. The son you could never give me." My voice broke. "Richard, don't lie to me." The neighbors fell silent, sensing the tension. Some exchanged curious glances, others leaned in to hear better. Richard's jaw tightened. "Go inside," he ordered through clenched teeth. But I didn't move. "Whose child is this?" I repeated louder this time. The young woman's eyes filled with tears. She shifted her weight, clearly uncomfortable. My heart was beating so hard I could hear it. And then, she whispered something so faint, I almost missed it. "It's not his." Gasps rippled through the small crowd. Richard's head snapped toward her, his eyes wide with rage. "Shut your mouth," he barked. But it was too late. The truth was clawing its way out. The woman bit her lip, shaking her head. "I can't lie anymore. It's Daniel's baby." The air seemed to vanish from my lungs. My brother. My own flesh and blood. My knees buckled, but I caught myself on the wooden post by the door. For a moment nobody spoke. The neighbors looked between us, hungry for every detail. My mind screamed, "This can't be happening." Richard's face twisted into something dark. "You stupid girl," he shouted, grabbing her arm. But she pulled back, holding the baby tightly to her chest. "I didn't mean for you to think he was yours," she said, her voice trembling. "You promised to take care of us if I told everyone it was your child." Now the whispers began. The neighbors' eyes were wide. Some covered their mouths. Others shook their heads in disgust. I stood there, frozen. My brother, Daniel, the boy I had raised like a son after our parents died, had betrayed me in the worst possible way. And Richard, my husband, had been parading another man's baby as his own, all to humiliate me. The young woman started crying, rocking the baby. "I can't do this anymore. I'm leaving." Richard stepped toward her, but I stepped in between them. My voice was shaking, but it was steady enough for everyone to hear. "Leave her alone." His eyes locked on mine, burning with fury. "Stay out of this." "I am this," I said, my voice rising. "Everything you've done, the lies, the humiliation. It ends today." The crowd was silent now. Every pair of eyes was on us. My hands clenched into fists. I had stayed quiet for years, swallowing my pain, carrying a shame that was never mine to carry. But now, with the truth out in the open, something inside me snapped. I turned to the neighbors, my voice loud and clear. "You've called me barren. You've mocked me for not giving him children. But hear me today. This man has been infertile since before we married. He knew it and he hid it. Every insult you threw at me should have been thrown at him." Gasps, murmurs, shocked faces. Richard's face went pale. "You're lying," he said quickly, but his voice lacked strength. I reached into my bag and pulled out the envelope I had been keeping for weeks. I held up the pieces of his medical report. "This is the truth," I said. "And I'm done protecting him." Some neighbors began to murmur in agreement. Others looked at him with open disgust. Richard's hands shook, and I could see his jaw working as if he was trying to find words. But before he could speak, a deep voice from the crowd said, "Is this why you've been spending time with my daughter?" Everyone turned. It was Mr. Collins, the father of the young woman with the baby. His face was dark with anger, his fists clenched at his sides. Richard's eyes widened. "Collins, shut your mouth," Mr. Collins growled, stepping forward. "You'll answer to me for this." The tension in the air was thick. The crowd parted, watching as Mr. Collins advanced on Richard. And then, before I could even think, Richard grabbed a stone from the ground and Richard's hand tightened around the stone. His eyes were wild, like a cornered animal. Stay back, he warned, his voice low and dangerous. But Mr. Collins didn't stop. He kept walking toward him, each step slow but heavy with rage. You deceived my daughter, humiliated my family, and dragged her into your twisted game, he said. Do you think I'll let that go? The crowd's murmurs grew louder. Some were shouting for Collins to teach Richard a lesson. Others were urging him to calm down. Put the stone down, Richard, I said, my voice trembling but firm. He glanced at me for half a second, and in that moment, I realized something. He wasn't just angry, he was scared. Scared because the truth was out. Scared because he no longer had control. But fear can make a man dangerous. In a sudden burst of movement, Richard raised the stone high. Gasps filled the air. Before he could bring it down, Mr. Collins lunged forward and grabbed his wrist. The stone tumbled to the ground with a dull thud. They struggled, each man trying to overpower the other. The baby in the young woman's arms began to cry loudly, the sound piercing the tense air. Stop this! I shouted, but they didn't hear me. Then, in a move so fast I almost missed it, Richard shoved Mr. Collins backward. The older man stumbled, nearly falling, but managed to steady himself. His face was red with fury. You're a coward, Richard, Mr. Collins spat. Hiding behind lies and women. Something in Richard snapped. He charged forward and punched Collins in the face. The crowd erupted, some rushing in to pull them apart, others standing frozen, too shocked to move. I pushed through the chaos, trying to get between them. Enough! I screamed. Finally, a few men managed to grab Richard's arms and hold him back. Mr. Collins wiped the blood from his lip, his eyes never leaving Richard's. You'll regret this, he said, his voice low and dangerous. Richard struggled against the men holding him, but they didn't let go. The crowd began to thin, people muttering about how disgraceful it all was. The young woman with the baby slipped away quietly, her face pale. When the last of the neighbors had gone, the men released Richard. He didn't look at me. He just picked up his jacket and walked inside the house without a word. I stood there in the empty courtyard, my body trembling. My mind was spinning, not just from what had happened, but from the bigger truth I had been avoiding. This marriage was dead. Later that night, I sat alone in the kitchen, staring at the pieces of his medical report on the table. My hands were cold, but my chest burned with a mix of anger and shame. I thought about the years I had wasted, the insults I had endured, and the truth I had buried to protect a man who never deserved my loyalty. And then I thought about Daniel, my brother. His betrayal cut even deeper than Richard's. I had raised him, cared for him, loved him like a son. And he had stabbed me in the back in the worst way possible. The next morning I made a decision. I would confront Daniel. I needed to hear it from his own mouth. I needed to see if he would deny it or admit to what he had done. But when I arrived at his house, I noticed something strange. The door was wide open, and the living room was a mess, chairs overturned, papers scattered, a broken vase on the floor. My heart pounded. Daniel! I called out, stepping inside. No answer. I walked further in, my hands shaking. Then I saw it. A trail of blood leading from the kitchen to the back door. And when I stepped outside, the early morning sun did nothing to warm the chill that gripped my spine. My eyes followed the thin, uneven trail of blood across the dusty backyard. Each step I took felt heavier, my breath coming in short bursts. Daniel! I called again, my voice cracking. Still no answer. The trail stopped near the old mango tree at the edge of his yard. That's when I saw him, Daniel, slumped against the trunk, his shirt torn, his face pale. Blood trickled from a cut on his forehead, and his right hand was clutching his side. I ran to him and dropped to my knees. Daniel, what happened? He looked up at me slowly, his eyes clouded with pain and something else, guilt. I didn't think he'd come here, he whispered. Who did this to you? I pressed a cloth from my bag to his wound, trying to slow the bleeding. Daniel's lips trembled. Richard. The name hit me like a slap. Richard was here? Why? He winced, his breathing shallow. He found out about the baby. Said I ruined his life. Said he'd make me pay. My hands froze for a second. Daniel, is it true? Is the baby yours? For a long moment he said nothing. His eyes darted away from mine. Finally, his shoulders slumped. Yes, he whispered. It's mine. The words felt like a knife twisting in my chest. I couldn't even speak. All I could do was stare at him, this boy I had once cradled in my arms, who I had defended against every insult, every hardship. Tears blurred my vision. Why, Daniel? Why would you do this to me? He shook his head, his voice breaking. I didn't mean to hurt you. I was weak. She came to me when I was drunk. It just happened. I thought no one would ever know. My hands trembled, not just from anger, but from the crushing weight of betrayal. And you let me take all the insults. You let them mock me every day, knowing the truth. He lowered his head. I'm sorry, sister. I wanted to scream, to shake him, to make him understand the depth of the wound he had given me. But before I could, I heard the sharp crunch of footsteps on gravel. I turned my head slowly. Richard was standing a few feet away, his shirt sleeves rolled up, his eyes cold and unblinking. In his hand was a thick wooden stick, stained at one end. You shouldn't be here, he said quietly, almost too calmly. My heart pounded. What did you do to him? Richard tilted his head. Just giving him a warning. Men who betray me don't live long. He took a step closer. I rose to my feet, planting myself between him and Daniel. If you touch him again, I swear. You swear what? He interrupted, a cruel smile spreading across his face. You'll tell everyone I can't have children? Too late for that. But me? I can still destroy you. Daniel coughed, his voice weak. Go, sister. Leave me. But I didn't move. My fingers curled into fists. No. This ends now. Richard's smile faded. His grip on the stick tightened. For a few seconds, the only sound was the wind in the mango leaves. Then without warning he swung the stick, and I grabbed it mid-swing. The force jolted through my arms, but I held on with everything I had. Our eyes locked, and in that moment I realized something. Richard wasn't invincible. He could bleed, he could be beaten, and most importantly, he could be left. I wrenched the stick from his hands and threw it to the ground. You're finished, Richard, I said, my voice steady despite the storm inside me. But then he smiled again. A smile that chilled me to the bone. You think you're free? You have no idea what I've done. My stomach dropped. What are you talking about? His eyes glittered. Ask your brother where your inheritance went. I turned to Daniel, but his face had gone pale, not from blood loss but from fear. And in that moment I knew. There was another betrayal I hadn't even uncovered yet. I stared at Daniel, my mind refusing to accept what I was hearing. What inheritance? I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. Daniel wouldn't look at me. His eyes stayed fixed on the ground, his breathing uneven. Daniel, I pressed, my voice rising. What did you do? Richard leaned casually against the mango tree, as if he had all the time in the world. Tell her, little brother, he said, his tone dripping with mockery. Tell her how you sold her future. Daniel's lips trembled. It's not what you think. Oh, I think it's exactly what I think, Richard cut in sharply. I stepped closer to Daniel, my heart pounding so hard it hurt. Tell me now, Daniel. What did you do with my inheritance? He finally looked at me, and the guilt in his eyes was enough to confirm my worst fears. I used it, he said quietly. My stomach turned. You used it? That money was all I had left from Mama and Papa. They left it for us, to build a better life. I know, he said quickly, his hands shaking. But I was desperate. I thought if I could invest in a business, I could double it, and we'd be better off. I blinked, my mind reeling. What business? Richard answered for him, his grin cruel. Mine. I turned to Richard in shock. Yours. Oh yes, Richard said smoothly. Your loving brother came to me with your money, begging for a way to make it grow. I told him I could help. And I did help myself, that is. The money was gone before he even realized. My legs felt weak. I turned back to Daniel, my voice breaking. You gave my inheritance to him? Daniel's eyes filled with tears. I didn't know he would take it. He promised he'd invest it in his workshop and give us both shares. I thought I was helping us. Richard laughed, a sound that scraped against my nerves. Helping? You were doing exactly what I wanted. I knew if I drained her savings, she'd have no way to leave me. And you, little brother, made it so easy. The air around me felt heavy. I could barely breathe. Not only had my husband betrayed me, my own brother had handed him the knife to stab me in the back. Why didn't you tell me? I asked Daniel, my voice low but sharp. He shook his head. I was ashamed. And then, after what happened with the baby, I couldn't face you. My hands were trembling, but not from fear. This was rage, pure and hot. Both of you, you've taken everything from me. My money, my dignity, my peace. Richard stepped closer, lowering his voice so only I could hear. Not everything. You still have me. Something in me snapped. I raised my hand and slapped him so hard that the sound echoed through the yard. His head whipped to the side, and for the first time since I had known him, Richard looked genuinely stunned. You, I said through clenched teeth, will never have me again. I turned to Daniel, my voice shaking. And you're no longer my brother. I turned to leave, my legs like lead, my chest tight. But before I could take more than 3 steps, Richard called after me. You think you can just walk away? He said, his voice dangerously calm. If you do, I'll tell the whole village something that will finish you for good. I stopped, my heart pounding. Slowly I turned back to face him. What could you possibly have left to say about me? His smile was slow and poisonous. That you were never truly barren. And the real reason you never had children with me was because... He leaned closer, his voice dropping to a whisper that made my blood run cold. You were already pregnant before we married. The ground seemed to shift beneath me. My breath caught in my throat. Because what he was hinting at was a secret I had buried deep for over 20 years. For a moment I couldn't move. The air around me felt thick, pressing against my chest. My eyes locked on Richard's, searching for any sign that this was just another one of his twisted lies. But the smirk on his face told me he knew exactly what he was saying, and that it was true. Daniel's eyes darted between us, confusion written all over his face. Pregnant? What is he talking about, sister? My throat was dry. Daniel, this isn't the time. Oh, it's exactly the time, Richard interrupted, stepping forward. Let me tell your dear brother what his perfect, innocent sister was hiding before she ever became my wife. I shook my head slowly. Don't you dare. But it was too late. Richard's voice rang out, clear and cruel. She was carrying another man's child when I married her. The words hit me like stones. Gasps filled the air from the few neighbors who had lingered at the edges of the yard, drawn back by the raised voices. Daniel's mouth fell open. Is that true? I swallowed hard, feeling my cheeks burn, not from guilt, but from the shame of having this part of my life ripped out into the open. Yes, I said finally, my voice trembling. The crowd leaned in. Richard folded his arms, enjoying every second. Tell them, love. Tell them how the baby just disappeared. My vision blurred as memories I had tried so hard to bury came rushing back. The man I had loved before Richard, the promises we made, and the night everything fell apart. I was 18. I began slowly. My voice shook, but I forced myself to continue. I met someone. We were young, foolish, and thought we could take on the world together. I got pregnant. But before we could even make plans, he died in an accident. There was a murmur in the crowd. Daniel's eyes softened a little. Sister, I never knew. I nodded faintly. No one knew. Not even Mama and Papa. I was scared, alone. And then Richard came into my life. He said he didn't care about my past. He promised to love me and raise the baby as his own. Richard's face twisted into mockery. Oh, I promised, all right. But the truth? I only married you because I thought you were desperate enough to stay forever. And when you lost that baby, I knew you'd never leave me. Who else would take you after that? The words sliced through me. The pain of losing that child, my first child, was something I had carried in silence for decades. And here he was, throwing it like mud for everyone to see. Daniel turned to Richard, his voice sharp. You're a monster. Richard just shrugged. Maybe. But I'm a monster who knows her deepest shame. And I can make sure everyone in this village sees her as nothing more than a used, barren woman. I stepped closer to him, my hands trembling, my voice low but steady. You can't shame me with something I've already forgiven myself for. That child was my heart, and I will never let you use his memory to hurt me." Richard's smirk faltered for just a moment, but then it returned. "We'll see about that." I turned to Daniel. "Help me get my things. I'm leaving." Daniel hesitated. "Where will you go?" "Anywhere but here," I said firmly. "I'd rather sleep under the open sky than spend another night under the same roof as him." We began walking toward my house, but then I noticed Richard wasn't following. He was leaning against the mango tree again, watching us with an expression that made my skin crawl. "You think you're walking away," he called after me, "but I haven't even told you the worst thing I've done yet." I stopped, my heart pounding. Slowly I turned back to face him. "What could possibly be worse than everything you've already done?" His smile widened. "The woman you've been seeing him with?" He nodded toward Daniel. "She's not just his lover. She's someone else you know very, very well." My breath caught. "What are you talking about?" Richard tilted his head, savoring my confusion. "Let's just say she's family." The world seemed to tilt again. My legs went weak. My voice was barely a whisper. "Who is she?" Richard chuckled darkly. "Go ask your cousin, Emily." I stood in the middle of the living room, my heart pounding so loudly I could almost hear it in my ears. My in-laws were still on the floor, their faces pale, their lips trembling. Samuel had fallen back into the chair, staring at me like he had never seen me before. I had just told them everything. Everything I had been holding inside for years. The truth about why I was childless. The truth that had burned me every single day of my life since I married Samuel. I can't believe this," Samuel whispered, his voice barely audible. "You went through all of that and you didn't tell me?" I swallowed hard, my eyes stinging with tears. "You never asked, Samuel. You just believed what they told you. You believed their gossip. You believed their mockery. You thought I was cursed, barren, useless." I shook my head. But I was never barren. I was robbed of my womb before I even had a chance to become a mother. Gasps filled the room again, but I didn't care anymore. They had to hear this. They had to know the real reason behind all the years of their cruelty. I turned to face Samuel fully. "When I was 19, before I even met you, I was attacked. A group of men, they hurt me, Samuel. So badly that the doctors had to remove my womb to save my life. I thought it was the end of me. I thought no man would ever want me. And then you came along and I thought God had given me a second chance. But instead I walked into another prison. A prison made of whispers, insults, and cold stares." Samuel's face twisted, torn between shock and something else I couldn't read. "All these years," I continued, my voice trembling, "I kept it to myself. I endured their insults. I smiled when they called me empty. I served them tea when they called me a failure. I stayed silent because I thought it would protect my dignity. But what did my silence give me? Pain, isolation, and the belief that I was nothing." One of the women, an aunt who had been the loudest in mocking me, broke down in tears. We didn't know. You didn't care to know," I cut in sharply. "None of you cared. You were too busy laughing. Too busy counting my years of marriage without a child. Too busy using my pain as your entertainment." Samuel ran a hand over his face, his breathing heavy. Why didn't you trust me with this? Why didn't you tell me from the start?" I looked at him, feeling the years of betrayal burning in my chest. "Because, Samuel, you never gave me a reason to. From the first year we were married, you joined them in taunting me. You let your mother call me a waste. You let your sisters throw my food away. You didn't defend me once. How could I share my deepest wound with a man who couldn't even protect me from his own family?" The room was silent. The air was thick with shame, but it didn't heal the hole inside me. Nothing could. I took a deep breath, my voice softer now but still firm. "I'm leaving. Not because I'm weak, but because I've finally realized my worth. I deserve peace. I deserve love. I deserve respect. And I won't waste another day begging for it from people who never gave it to me." Samuel's head snapped up. "You can't just." "I can," I said, my voice steady. "And I will." I turned toward the door, my bag already packed in the corner. My legs shook, but I kept walking. I had stayed silent for too long. As I reached the door, Samuel's voice broke behind me. "If you walk out now, you're ending everything." I paused, my hand on the doorknob. I didn't turn around. Samuel, everything ended the day you chose their voices over mine. And with that, I stepped out into the cool evening air. For the first time in years, I felt the weight on my chest lift, even if only a little. I didn't know where I was going, but I knew I would never let anyone define my worth again. The life lesson was simple, but it had taken me a lifetime to learn it. Sometimes silence isn't strength. Sometimes silence only protects the ones who hurt you. And when you finally speak, speak for yourself, not for their understanding. I walked down the road, away from the house, away from the years of pain. My tears fell, but they were not tears of defeat. They were the tears of a woman who had finally set herself free.